Hi, Laurence. Thanks very much for joining us on the podcast.
Hi, John. Nice to see you. Beardy, fellow Beardy.
I know. And we met probably about a decade ago in the basement of a restaurant where I was running my Scanners Night event for creative people with lots of ideas. And you are the ultimate person with lots of ideas, with so many fascinating different ideas. That's why I wanted to talk to you and find out about some of these things that you've been working on. Most recently, the art of having no idea.
Yeah. Well, when you have that many ideas, you have to one day call time out, right? Well, either you're someone who's very good at executing on ideas and you've got a great filter for ideas and you make them happen, or you test them and then let them go and then so on. And I believe there are people like that, but I'm not someone like that. I'm someone who has ideas just for the sake of ideas. I'm almost like an idea machine. And I think that's the writer in me, the creative in me. And I'm an odd mix, because I started out life, in a creative family, very creative, quite disorganized, quite lefty. Went to university, went hell for leather for the A-levels and university stuff, went to Oxbridge and ended up working in McKinsey and consultancy firm and finance. And so I kind of grew this part of my brain that was highly analytical and very logical, and yet inside me there's a sort of creative, and the creatives, I think, just love having ideas just for the sake of it. I mean, what's the best thing a creative can have, is just being paid for having ideas, or getting approval or love for having ideas because it's just fun. And so I've spent a lot of time wrestling with trying to fit stuff into a project or a logical pattern, or we were talking just before this about creating marketing plans and so on, and nothing has ever stuck for me, because although when I come up with ideas, they sound really good, like they sound like they should run and run, but there's a part of me that gets bored once I've done it, and then I want to do the next idea. So the art of having no idea is it's actually the fruit of a long inquiry. And the basic strapline of the art of having no idea is, it's impossible to have a good idea unless you first have no idea. And discriminating between ideas that are like mind fluff, pocket fluff, that don't have any sustainability or influence, and they're not perhaps even original. Discriminating between those and ideas that are genuinely inspired and have the energy inside them of action is the art of having no idea. And it's a journey I began when I finished my first book, The Optimist, which was a classic Laurence idea. I'm going to write this book, and it's going to be a radio series, and I'm going to be on telly, and I'm going to interview everyone in the world, and it's going to solve all of my problems. And it's going to tick all these different boxes for me. It's going to be funny, entertaining, intelligent, informative. It's going to change the world. And I had all these boxes I wanted to tick, and I did it. And I got a great publishing deal, and someone at the door who just rang the doorbell. And it took 3 years of my life, and I'd say I almost burned out. John, I'm going to have to tell my wife that the doorbell is wrong. I'm really sorry.
Okay, sure.
Do you mind if I do that?
Yeah, go on.
Narina, doorbell rang. Sorry about that.
She's outside.
Yeah, we're in quarantine. Yeah.
Oh,
so
right.
if someone rings, it might be the police.
Oh, right.
Anyway, or just Amazon. So I found myself on the other side of this, having written this book, and I did get on telly, and I was flown around the world in different countries, do publicity, and that whole publicity round, you get caught up in radio interviews in Paris and London and Canada, all very exciting. And then it came to an end, and I was like, well, phone stopped ringing. I wasn't overnight famous, and suddenly I realized that I was exhausted, and I didn't realize it properly with my mind. I was like, well, I'm going to do my next project and do my next idea. But none of the ideas that popped into my mind and as I said, I'm an ideas person. So there are always ideas. None of them had enough energy. And what I realized I needed to do was to do nothing. And it was very hard for me because I come from this very driven kind of achievement-oriented educational background. Exams, getting in, getting approval, jumping the hurdle. Achieve ideally by the time you're 30, and if not by 40, make your million and be whatever, pursue your dreams, all that stuff that everyone is hooked on. And so the idea of not doing something was anathema to me. But I got up in the morning, I couldn't will myself to do anything. It was as if my body said, no, I'm done. You've pushed me too far. This isn't how I want to live. I like to say how odd it is, especially when you're a freelancer or you run your own business. It's almost like you're two people. You've got your head, it's the manager, and then you've got the rest of you. And you expect the rest of you to do everything, right? And you tell it to do stuff, and then it doesn't always want to do stuff, right? So we all struggle with motivation because we're trying to get the most out of ourselves. And in this case, my body just said, no, I'm not interested. And whatever the biochemical reasons were, adrenal exhaustion perhaps, or depression caused by suppression of emotions that I had for years. The consequence was that I took 3 or 4 months and did nothing. And absolutely, I'd go to the park every day and I'd sit on a bench, get up early in the morning. I didn't watch telly, didn't read books. I just allowed myself to do nothing. And it was an amazing experience. It was difficult because it felt uncomfortable. But the consequence was, after 3 or 4 months, I could feel a deeper kind of mojo coming back. And I started drawing pictures and cartoons, and like I was a kid again. And it was like a part of me woke up again. A part of me that had been asleep for a long time, that had been sidelined really during school and upbringing, woke up. I was like, I'm going to be part of your life from now on. And out of that insight, the insight being that when I stopped doing things, there's something else that wants to happen that is more powerful and creative than the ideas that my brain comes up with. And those things can express as ideas, but it comes from a deeper source. And from that came the Lazy Guru. The Lazy Guru name just popped into my head during that time. It became a book. I ran it, I did workshops, and I had something called the Lazy Guru Self-Organizing University, where I invited people. Everyone who came along was like faculty, everyone came along, and like an unconference. And this sort of the Lazy Guru thing flourished for a few years, and it was lovely because it came out of that space. And now the art of no idea is my way of grounding this insight. And the insight is that unless you protect space for non-achievement, unless you create space for not having to do a task of some kind, then creativity is really not going to be there. It's going to be very shallow. And I'm including meditation, yoga, going for a run in the list of tasks. Often we will lay a trip on ourselves. I don't do enough X, Y, Z. I should do more. And what is actually happening is our nervous systems are very keyed up, and we're often on a very high alert. And how we relax and unwind is often quite stimulating too. Whether it involves alcohol or Netflix or going to the gym, it's also quite keying up the nervous system. And so when you create that space, the space of not having to know what you're doing, it's uncomfortable, but it allows your body to recover and rest, and the mind, and then you can tap into that unconscious space. So I love monologuing, which I've just been doing.
No, but I love this idea, and I'm really addicted to Facebook, and it's so easy to feel every single moment. Like if I stop for 5 minutes for a break or something after a task, or after we've talked. It's so easy to go to Facebook and look it up and just, get a hit from likes and comments and whatever else. Or look at something else on your phone. And I really have to force myself not to do that. And I have to remind myself, John, be bored. Just stare out the window and just allow yourself to have nothing on your mind. And it's the same when I'm in a queue or I'm waiting for a bus or something. It's like, don't reach for your phone. I have to kind of tell myself, just be bored, because that's when actually what I realized, I've become less creative in the last few years. And I think the two things that have contributed to that is filling every moment, mostly with, stuff on my phone. And the other thing is surfing social media instead of reading books. Because reading books and doing nothing seems to be the two things that fire up my ideas for writing. So I'm absolutely fascinated in what you've come up with. Have you turned it? So what is The Art of Having No Idea? So is it a book yet? Are you running workshops or something?
Yeah. So as I said, the experience of this first happened to me, 10 years ago, the burnout and the insight. And what I feel has happened is I've been integrating that and learning more and more about, how do you make that real? And what I've understood is that in order to be creative, some people have, we call them artists or musicians or whatever, have the natural disposition of being creative. And that is an amazing mixture of structure and freedom. And if you read books about creative people, and there's a wonderful book that I recommend to everyone called Daily Rituals. The author of the name of the author I forget, but it's easy to find. It's a brilliant book, and he researched the daily habits of artists, inventors, scientists, and there's dozens and dozens, men and women, and you read through it, and you get a real sense for, at the heart of the creative person, although sometimes dysfunctional and addictive and very unhappy, and there's a spectrum. Some of them were very happy, but they all had this combination of ruthless discipline and commitment with an extraordinary kind of freedom and playfulness. And they could be very disorganized and chaotic in the rest of their life, but there was always a rigidity about their work, their creative work. So the insight was, and I've always struggled to carve the time out to be creative, is that creativity is, first of all, something that we are all capable of. It's a human right, and it requires holding. It requires structure, a bit of holding structure. And if you're wired into the transactional mode of being, a commercial mode of being, service, transaction, the whole capitalist commercial system that we're in. And my brain is really wired into it, responding to emails and making things happen. It's very difficult to create the new wiring, the new neural pathways, literally, of creativity, unless you create that structure. And that structure is what I call holding structure, is very hard to do unless there's accountability. And so The Art of No Idea is set up as a monthly group. I set a challenge each month. And the challenge is something very simple, by the way, like you're going to time yourself doing nothing for 20 minutes today. Each day, you have 10 to 20 minutes of doing nothing, right?
I want this. I want it.
Yeah, good.
So what is it? Is it a Facebook group or something you're running in? Or what? No,
it's a course I've set up on a subscription platform. Very, very low donation at the moment because I'm still in beta. And it should be a Facebook group because that would give it more of the community thing. The essence of it is we all need a bit of a nudge to do what we know we need to do. And just like changing habits, getting creative requires creating new habits in ourselves. And the only reason I can talk about this is because I'm so bad at it, or I've been so bad at it, that it's given me an insight. And just as the world, and this is the big picture, the grandiose stuff, I'm going to say, just as the world is needing to shift from a transactional, consumerist mode into something that we don't know what it looks like yet, a much more creative society, a much more creative world, and creativity implies collaboration and openness and not knowing what's going to happen. We each need to individually rewire. We're each experiencing that shift, and it's quite hard. It's hard for us to rewire ourselves, so we need to help each other out.
Yeah, I think this is fascinating. Something I'm very interested in. And now, meanwhile, alongside all of this, is your day job working with corporations and stuff? Is that very different?
Well, like I said, there's these two parts of me, and almost the hemispheres. And I know that model has been debunked a bit. The brain hemispheres corresponding really in a really simplistic way to analysis and creativity, And yet it is as if there are the task of my life has been to bring together those two sides. So the part of me that can be bullet pointy, and I think a plan will solve everything, and logically rigorous and analytical, is actually a great gift, right? And I can really help people get clear on things. But without, and the creative part of me, just when I'm at a festival or whatever, it's like, I'm a bit of a nutter, right? So, but integrating, weaving them together so that I don't have two identities online. That's been the path of the last couple of years, the last probably 5 years. So that, yes, I do corporate work, and most of my day job is coaching individuals who work in professional services, or they run companies at partner or CEO level, or at least manager level, senior manager level, or their teams. But I do my best to bring this stuff into it. And actually, coaching is anyway, at its heart, the art of having no idea, because you can't coach someone really without being totally available in the moment, as if you're, playing tennis. And that's where I feel hopeful that the integration between those two sides is in the art of having ideas. The essence of it all is that openness. And that has a neurological correspondence that is less wishy-washy than it might sound.
Well, in fact, there is some research, isn't there? But it's the point when your brain is ticking over, not particularly doing anything, but it starts to do some rebuilding and some other work that it doesn't get a chance to do when you're concentrating.
Yeah. Yeah, there's science behind it, and John Cleese talks about it quite a lot as well. He's just put a book out about creativity, and the book and the whole concept of flow touches on that. And yet I think it's still not yet well understood that creativity is an essential, regardless of whether you're an artist or not, and that it's a capacity that everyone needs to develop. So I bring it into my work whenever I can.
Yeah. So,
but just the last thing I'd say to that is, I would love to be even more myself in my work, meaning I am, and I don't need to prove, I don't need to be professional. And in fact, that's why you're buying me, because I'm not a professional. You're buying me because I've got no idea.
And I think to a certain extent you can do that. I've got some friends who are kind of a bit like that. And my friend, the rock and roll psychotherapist, Jerry Hyde, who sort of turned up at a ad agency but unfortunately got kicked out at the point he suggested everyone take ayahuasca, or was it microdosing mushrooms? I can't remember. But anyway, also Jamie Cato, there's an image of him talking at some big conference. It's just him, former rock star. He's being faithless, just sitting back doing the kind of stuff he always does, and he tells individuals, and getting paid all the more because he doesn't compromise. So I think you can do it. I think my theory is you have to just kind of have the kind of, I don't know what it is. You have to kind of behave like a star a bit more, and just go like, here I am and I'm amazing, but without being obnoxious about it. When you work out how to do it, let me know.
That's all true, and I find I can do that when I'm invited to do that. What I think the big sticking point for me, and I would imagine for many people, especially now, is, I've got to create the platform for myself to show up. I've got to create I've got to do all this transactional tasky stuff in order to then relax and be a rock star. And actually, that's not how rock stars roll, right? Rock stars don't do that. Someone else does it for them. So the edge I'm at the moment is, and this is why the art of having no idea is important for me, is be in that space every day, be the rock star, do what you feel like doing. Don't do the other stuff, just don't do it. And that is a trick for me. That is tricky for me because I've got kids and a wife to feed, and because I've got my own success templates that cause me anxiety. But I got to do it. There's no other way. You've got to be the change you want to see in the world, right? So
yeah,
I got to be rock and roll.
And I'm certainly a proponent of the, we're all humans. Let's stop kidding. So I don't do any corporate work, but if I did, I think, well, everything I do, I try and live the values of, we're all humans here. Let's stop pretending that there's some sort of professional version of us which doesn't have feelings and doesn't have problems, doesn't have bad days. Let's be a bit more authentic. I mean, still professional in the sense that if someone pays you to do some work, you do the work. But otherwise, you don't have to you don't necessarily need to dress up. You don't necessarily need to, use a certain kind of language that you wouldn't use elsewhere.
Yeah, although funnily enough, I've realized that on that note about dressing up, see what I'm wearing now, right? So I bought a bunch of shirts in my 20s and 30s that I thought I'd never wear again. Because I've got to let go of that identity, right? German street shirts and this sort of, and then I'm such a natural scruff that I realized it wasn't making me happy. And in the last couple of days, the last week, I'm like, do you know what? I kind of like looking a bit smart because people are like, I feel a little bit of dignity with my scruffy beard and my, bald, like scarecrow hair. And transmitting some of that paradox to people, I think is quite nice, isn't it?
Yeah. No, I think that's good. And I get what you mean about dressing up because sometimes, I'm sitting around the house and I think I'm actually too indecent to go to Tesco's. I'm too poorly dressed to even get on the bus. So, and there's a moment when you do kind of you just smile yourself up a bit. It has an effect. So it's a kind of gathering together. It made me think when you were talking earlier about having boundaries. I think of when I was studying at Spectrum Psychotherapy Center, doing their courses for psychotherapists. They talk about formative psychology, which is how the body shapes your experience. Kind of, it's a simple version. Stanley Kellerman's work of formative psychology. There was another term for it as well, but I've forgotten. And one of the things they said is that it's about, you have to form yourself to go to work. And so the reason why people struggle on a Monday morning is because they've changed their shape physically. So you kind of become a little bit more liquid over the weekend and you sort of become this, sofa person. And you're like, you could almost be poured into a container in whatever shape the container is. And then you have to kind of start to pull yourself up. And there is, there's diagrams in Stanley Kellerman's books, which by the way, are impenetrable if anybody wants to look at them. But there are diagrams which are beautifully drawn of people forming themselves and moving upwards and outwards and stuff. And so the leader of one of the founders of Spectrum said, the problem with Monday morning is you're still forming your professional body. So you don't have a physical shape yet. And it's only about halfway through Monday where you actually okay, let's get some shit done. And so there's that sense of there's that pulsing as well. They talk about pulsing between formed and unformed. And I think what I thought about when you talk about the creativity thing needing boundaries is it's a bit like if you don't give children boundaries, and since you've recently become a parent, it is not good. It's not like they thank you for it. It's actually very anxiety inducing because if you don't know where the walls are, and you don't know whether it's almost like you're in you kind of, there's no limit and you don't know where you're going to fall off and go too far. It's actually a very anxiety producing state for a child to be in. And I think because creative people are probably, the naturally creative people you're talking about, they particularly need that structure, because otherwise they will spin out, because they're so full of ideas and they're so unbounded within themselves. They need a structure which allows them to be creative every day safely and still,
Like T.S. Eliot working at the Bank of England all his life.
Oh, wow. Did he? Didn't know he
or Philip Larkin being a librarian. But yeah, on that note, just what you said about children, picking up on that. My in the little constellation of insights, I don't know if they deserve the term insights or not, but for me, the aha moments are the creative faculty is very associated with the child, the inner child. And if as a child you were not properly contained or boundaried, or you were boundaried too strongly, over-disciplined or under-disciplined, which often happens, you can often have both. I think I had a bit of both. Then the play part, the creative part, doesn't feel safe. And so it's all about, in a way, it's about reparenting yourself. And for me, there's a kind of a nurturing of self that this is about. At its heart, this is about nurturing. It's cradling the self so that it feels safe enough to be creative. And I would say it takes me, I can spend hours in the day before I get to the point of feeling safe. But you don't know it. It's not like I feel unsafe, I'm panicking. So no, I'm just doing computer stuff. And which actual mammal in their right mind would do computer stuff? They wouldn't. If you felt really safe, if you felt totally safe, I'm a billionaire, I don't need to do anything. You wouldn't go, would you? For hours and hours, you wouldn't. You'd use your computer sometimes, but if you felt completely safe, probably your relationship with work would be different. I can reach that, I call it going in the zone, or being in flow. I can reach it a couple of times a day, and I really feel I'm in it. Oh yeah, this is it. I'm kind of in this mode. I don't want to stop. I think I envy people who are in it more often, but I acknowledge that having been mildly traumatized by lack of safety or boundaries when I was young, the creative part of me needs to be really held and contained. And I need to be very forgiving about it if I don't wake up feeling creative. If I manage to be creative an hour or two a day, that's brilliant. Even half an hour.
No, that's really interesting. And I can relate to a lot of this and that feeling of safety and spending time getting there. I mean, you mentioned, a billionaire feels completely safe. Well, interestingly, of course, what happens if people who win the lottery or people who cash out of their business, they actually unravel. So they have a kind of existential crisis because, and in a lesser way, you see it in people who I work with who quit their jobs or lose their jobs. And then they go, well, now I'm going to work on finding my business idea or my career or whatever it is. And I go like, well, wait a minute, get a job in a library or in the bank, like T.S. Eliot or whatever, because you need some structure. You need to be putting on some smarter clothes and going out to work, maybe 2 days a week or something, or 1 day a week, so that there is a rhythm to your week. Otherwise, it's like there's the rest of your life in one long line. And it's like this giant wasteland of desert and for you to fill in. And very few humans actually have so much structure within themselves, but they can use that and they can kind of go like, okay, right, well, Monday's going to be my day when I do research. Tuesday is going to be like sports day. Very few people are able to do that because they've always had a job. Most of us have always had a job or been at school. And so to suddenly have complete freedom that goes on indefinitely, not just for, a summer holiday, is really, really stressful and it rarely goes well. So I recommend people be very careful about going down that strategy unless you've done all the thinking work before you left your job and you go, this is what I'm going to do. And then as soon as you quit, you might allow yourself a week or two off for holiday, but then you go like, right, I'm building this business. Because I don't think that contradicts with what you're saying, because I think you need the gaps within that to where you're not doing anything, where you're bored, where you have no idea. But you also need something that's giving you structure longer term.
Yeah, you need some kind of a structuring project or focus, and I agree with what you say. I think there are people who get good at it. Artists have to, creatives have to, and I know a couple of professional playboys as well who've managed to go through the I'd say the painful experiences of living in the void, and they've just learned that for their own sanity they need to structure and be productive and methodical without having a job. So it's possible, but like you said, I think you need to do the work first, and maybe it's about choice, isn't it? Because if I choose that I'd really love to be a painter, well, I'm going to commit to that structure, and that structure is limitless and open-ended and scary. But if I've got the bottle for that, and the talent and the desire, then I can do it. And for me, it is this thing about vast open space. It's frightening. It's actually, being a person is rather frightening, especially if you're not in a job. And more jobs themselves are very transient. And being a person is frightening because you realize more and more it's all down to you. And unless you live in some kind of Nordic paradise of welfare state thing where you can relax, and that somehow your survival is going to, and the people who depend on you, is all down to you. It's frightening. I wake up and think, geez, it's all down to me.
I know.
Oh my God, and it's overwhelming. So again, like the child, to go back to the child, that child needs to be soothed and taken care of. So if you can take care of yourself, then you can be creative and you can achieve some of your potential. No one's ever going to achieve all their potential, right? That's why the word's called potential. But you can achieve some of your potential, right?
Yeah, good. Well, that's a good note to end on. If people want to find out all about Laurence Shorter, where should they go to, Laurence?
Thanks, John. So I've got a website which does its best to be both of my bits, but it's rather professional looking when you come into it. Don't be put off by the corporateness of it. I'm, you know who I am, a raving madman. LaurenceShorter.com. So that's LAURENCE, Shorter, just how it sounds, /courses. If you just go to that lays out the art of having no idea. Would love anyone to join, and it's a rolling thing, so it doesn't have a start date. It starts every month. And I've really enjoyed this conversation.
I think it's been fantastic. Absolutely. Sometimes I was stuck for what to say because I was still thinking about what you were saying. So that's a rare thing for me. It's really interesting. And if people want to find your books, you can be found on Amazon, obviously. Is The Art of Having No Idea going to be a book?
I hope so. Yeah, that's one of my projects.
I think it should be. Yeah, I think that sounds like a really good idea.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Well, thanks very much, Laurence. Appreciate it.
Thanks, John.